Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Shevuot. This is our second class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 7 through 13. And if you remember, we were discussing different people that are going to bring the special korban that we discussed at the beginning, which is what's called an olet v'yored, sin offering that is on a sliding scale. So we're going to be discussing different transgressions that you would be liable to bring this sacrifice. So we were talking about going into the temple area while a person is impure, right? If a person is impure, they are not allowed to go into the temple. And if they do, they have to bring a sin offering, a korban chatat, olet v'yored, again, the sliding scale. Or if you are impure and you eat from sacrificial meat, which is called kodshim, right? From the word kadosh, it's holy. So if one eats from sacrificial meat when they are tameh, again, they are liable for this sin offering. However, if they just touch the sacrifice, they are not liable, and they do not have to bring that type of sacrifice. If a person did these two things on purpose, so then you would be liable for karet. Again, karet is the punishment that God gives for very severe transgressions, where a person is cut off. We are not exactly sure what that means. It might mean that they do not have a portion in the next world. It might mean that they die young, but it's very severe. And again, if you did it on purpose, that would be the punishment. Therefore, if you did it, if you ate it, but you would have to bring a sacrifice if it was by accident. But again, if you touched it, you would not need to bring this sacrifice. We have a verse from the Torah that gives a warning and a punishment for both of these things. Now, you only bring a sin offering, a korban chatat, if you do a transgression that you would have gotten karet if you did it on purpose, right? So again, you bring a sin offering when you do something by accident, bishogeg, right? And we'll see in a minute what that means, bishogeg. How do you do it by accident? We'll discuss that. We'll discuss that in a minute. Therefore, if the punishment is very severe, karet, if you do it on purpose, if you do it by accident, then you would bring this korban. Okay, that's the end of Daf 6. Daf 7 tells us that you're only liable for, again, as we mentioned, what's called mikdash, going into the temple, or kodshim, meaning eating sacrificial meat, when you are impure, when you are tameh. And again, the Gemara discusses what verse is teaching us each one of these things. Maybe we need another verse to teach that you have to bring this sacrifice for these two transgressions. And the Gemara says, actually, these two sins, right, these two ideas of entering the mikdash and eating from the sacrificial meat, they are linked. They're related one to the other, and therefore you can learn one from the other, but it doesn't include if you would eat truma, right? Truma, again, is the gift that is separated for the kohanim, for the priests, and if they would eat it when they were impure, that would not be included in what we were discussing right now. So the Gemara teaches that it says the word shlamim, which is another type of sacrifice. It says it 3 times that you would get karet in relation to shlamim. What does that mean? So 1, if you eat any korban while you're tameh, while you're impure, then you would get karet. Again, karet being that you would get cut off. Now this is called, we've seen this principle before, but we're going to see it specifically here. We've seen this before, that there are different principles by which we explain the Torah. One of them is what's called klal, prat, klal. Klal means a general statement. Prat means a specific statement. Klal, again, means another general statement. So here the Gemara is going to explain, right? Again, it says the word karet 3 times when discussing the korban shlamim, the sacrifice of the shlamim. So 1 is if you eat any korban while you're tameh, while you're impure, you get karet. That's a general statement. Prat is specifically if you eat the korban shlamim. That's very specific. Only shlamim, not necessarily any other sacrifice. And then the 3rd times it says when you are impure and you eat, right? And you eat kadshim, again, sacrificial meat, or it comes to teach that if you come into the temple area while you are tameh, right? Or for things that are not usually eaten, like again, maybe a sacrifice that isn't food, right? Like the Torah, the incense. Maybe it's coming to include that as well, and that you would also get karet for that. Or maybe it's talking about if you ate from a sacrifice that nobody ate from, which, for example, is the sin offering that is sacrificed inside the temple area, not in the courtyard, but further in. Actually, nobody, right? Nobody eats from that sacrifice. Or, so that's one idea. Or maybe, again, it says the word, we said before, it says the word karet 3 times. Now it says, well, wait a minute, it also says the word tameh, impure, 3 times. How? Right, 1 for the general statement, 1 for the specific statement, and 1 about regular impurity, about, again, eating sacrificial meat or entering the temple area. So again, we have different ways to understand how we see that there is this prohibition. Another explanation is that we have what's called a gzeira shava. Gzeira shava is another principle where we have one word or the same word in 2 different topics, and because the same word is being used, it links those 2 topics together. So the Gemara says, right, it says the word tameh, impure, when discussing going into the temple, and that you would have to bring a sin offering, again with the sliding scale, korban chatat ole v'yored. Therefore, right, again, if you enter the temple by accident, b'shogeg, right, you forgot that you were impure, so then you have to bring a korban ole v'yored, right, because both of them have the word tameh in them, therefore it links the 2 together. And the Gemara says, even if you were impure from eating something that's of a lower level, meaning you ate the carcass of a kosher bird, you're still impure, and you would still be liable if you went into the temple area. Okay, we said maybe you'd be liable for touching the meat, and you would have to bring the sacrifice. But we said, but for something, right, it has to be that you'll bring the sacrifice only if you eat it, not if you touch it, right? And therefore, it's not if you touch it, only if you eat it. Now, what does this mean, b'shogeg, by accident? How do you do this by accident? So the Gemara explains that you had to have had knowledge that you were impure originally, we'll call it at the beginning, and then you forgot, and then you went into the temple, and then you went out, and then you remembered, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. I was impure. That's called knowledge in the beginning and knowledge at the end. Okay, but you forgot in the middle. Obviously, if you remembered in the middle, that's called bemazid. You did it on purpose because you knew. But if you forgot in the middle, that's called shogeg, right? You did it by accident. Now, if you knew in the beginning and in the end, again, you forgot in the middle, then you have to bring the sacrifice that we mentioned, the olev yored. If you didn't have knowledge in the beginning and the end, so then the goat that is brought on Yom Kippur is going to suspend your punishment. Okay, it's going to suspend it till you remember, oh my gosh, I can't believe last week I went into the mikdash and I went right to the temple and I was impure. Oh, right, as soon as you remember, now you can bring the korban olev yored, right? So again, you need to have that knowledge, then you can bring the sacrifice. If you don't have that knowledge, you cannot. Okay, so now since we're talking about the goat that is brought on Yom Kippur, so let's just remind ourselves. We actually read it last week in Parshat Shevuot. On Yom Kippur, and we actually learned it, but it was probably about 4 years ago. We learned in Masechet, maybe 3 years ago, in Masechet Yoma, we learned that on Yom Kippur, they bring 2 identical goats, se'irim. Se'ir is a goat in Hebrew. They bring 2 se'irim, 2 goats into the temple. And if you remember, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, does a lottery, and one of them is called LeHashem, and that is the sacrifice. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And the other one, it is LeAzazel, right, is sent out of the temple area to the desert to be pushed off a cliff. Now, each one of those goats are, both of them are sin offerings. They're korban chatat, but they atone for different things. So now the Gemara tells us that the se'ir that is going to stay in the temple, it's called the se'ir LeHashem, for God. Maybe it atones for only 3 types of impurity. Maybe it atones for if you transgressed, right, with idolatry or forbidden relations, or murder, right? These are the 3, right? I would say, right, the 3 most stringent transgressions. You might think that the se'ir, the goat that is on Yom Kippur, only atones for those things. The Gemara says no. It actually atones for what we've been talking about, what we're going to be called, again, Tum'at Mikdash, again, if you were impure and you went into the temple, or you ate sacrificial meat when you were impure. And it does not atone for the 3 capital offenses that we mentioned before, right? Those big 3 cannot be atoned for, right? You have to do something else for those. Now, again, we said that this goat atones for if you were impure and you went into the temple. So now the Gemara says, wait a minute. If you knew in the beginning, but not in the end, so then, and that's why we brought this here, right? Then the goat is going to suspend your punishment. right? Till you remember what you did. But if you didn't know at all, you never knew that you were impure, you didn't know that you went in that you were impure, and you didn't find out at the end, so then this goat does not atone for you. Okay, so then the Gemara says, okay, let's talk about idolatry for a minute. With idolatry, if you do it on purpose, we know from the last Masechet, or from 2 Masechets ago, you're going to get capital punishment, right? So if you did it on purpose without any warning, or you did it by accident and you didn't know about it, so then you might think that this goat on Yom Kippur is going to atone for you. The Gemara says, no, it doesn't work for you, right? The same thing with Gilui Arayot, the same thing with inappropriate relations. It's the same thing. If you didn't have warning or you didn't know about it, this goat is not going to help you. Same thing with murder. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. Okay, so now let's talk about this goat, right? The Seir LaHashem, the goat for God. Only works for what we mentioned. If you were impure and you went into the temple or you ate from kachim. So now the Gemara asks, maybe other sins that are unique are also included in this sacrifice. The Gemara says, no, only, right, those are things that are sins, not impurity. So we're only going to talk about these, this sacrifice will only atone for this specific sin. It says that it atones again for this thing, or maybe the verse teaches that he needs to sprinkle the blood on the thing that is sanctified, or maybe it's learned from another verse. And then the Gemara says, no, right? Again, this goat does not atone if you knew in the beginning and the end. Remember, we said if you knew in the beginning and the end, you bring the korban olev yored. Now, what happens if he found out right before Yom Kippur and he didn't bring this sacrifice? So maybe we could say that this goat will atone for him. And the Gemara says, no, it doesn't. Okay. Then we said maybe it only atones for things, again, the goat from Yom Kippur, it only atones for things that you knew about. Maybe it's only for things you knew about at the end, but not in the beginning. The Gemara says, no, the regular, now we didn't mention this, but on Yom Kippur, the regular musaf sacrifice is also a goat. This is what's called the outside goat. Again, not outside La'azazel, we're going to get there in a minute, but outside of the sanctuary, meaning in the courtyard. This is the regular musaf sacrifice. That is going to atone if you didn't know in the beginning, but you did know at the end. Right? And therefore, it'll only work for things that he will eventually bring a korban chatat for, but not what we just mentioned. Okay, so now the Gemara continues. Again, this outside goat, the one that's the musaf of Yom Kippur, as we mentioned, will atone if you only knew at the end, but not at the beginning. Again, the animal that's inside, the goat that's inside, only atones for one type, even if they ran out of animals and they couldn't do the goat outside. It does not work for other things. It's very unique. Okay, Daf 9 tells us, sorry, that was all Daf 8. Daf 9 says that there is an opinion that says if you did not know at the beginning, but you did know at the end, some have the opinion that you could bring the korban olev yored, and that the outside goat atones for when you don't know anything. Okay, and then the Gemara says, no, right? So, okay, so now we're going to see 3 different opinions on these sacrifices. Now, we are going to see that, we have sin offerings on Yom Kippur, right? As we mentioned before, the goat on Yom Kippur. We have a goat that is brought on the 3 main holidays, the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. And then there's a sin offering that's brought on Rosh Chodesh, right? On the new moon, right? The new month. Okay, so there are goats brought 3 different, right, in 3 different situations: Yom Kippur, Shalosh Regalim, Rosh Chodesh. Now, we're going to discuss what does each one atone for. That's number 1. And can we bring, right, one for the other, right? Let's say you set aside this goat for Yom Kippur, and I didn't bring it on Yom Kippur. Can I bring it on the next holiday? Now, when I said but it's not these are communal sacrifices, not personal sacrifices. Okay, so now there are going to be 3 different opinions on this topic. Okay, so here we go. If you didn't, again, back to what we were discussing, if you didn't know in the beginning or the end, so then the goat of the Shalosh Regalim, of the 3 main holidays, and Rosh Chodesh are going to atone for you, right? Because it says the word chatat leHashem. It's a sin offering to God. Only God knows about this sin. And therefore, right, what does that mean? Only God knows about it. You didn't know at the beginning and you didn't know at the end. Or, right, maybe only the goat, right? So now it's going to go through, right? The goat of Rosh Chodesh is going to atone for, right? It says chatat leHashem, right? It's a sin offering for God. So the question is, what does that mean for God? So one opinion, as we said, only what God knows, which means I did something wrong. I didn't know anything about it. So this sacrifice is going to atone for me. Another opinion, which is, I think, fascinating, is it's a sin offering for God to bring because God sinned. What does that mean? Because, again, we're talking about Rosh Chodesh. What does this mean? Right? God is atoning for the fact that he made the moon smaller. If you remember, there's a famous midrash that originally God created the sun and the moon in equal size. And then the moon got very upset that, what does this mean? The sun gets to, right, rule the whole day, and God punishes the moon and made the moon smaller. Here it's saying that, right, this is something that we don't really understand, but maybe this is a sin offering for God, or maybe it's for both. Okay, so that is the goat of Rosh Chodesh. Next, we have the goat of Yom Kippur. That comes at a set time once a year. And Rosh Chodesh also comes at a set time every month. Both of them atone for, again, as we mentioned, impurity. If you were impure and you entered the mikdash or you ate sacrificial meat, okay, what about the Shalosh Regalim? Right, it doesn't say that they are for atonement, but they are connected to Rosh Chodesh, and therefore it also atones for Tumat Mikdash, what we just mentioned, that does not have awareness at the beginning and at the end, right? Again, maybe you'll eventually find out, and then the Gemara says, no, right, these are, you'll never know, right? You'll never know because you didn't know in the beginning and you didn't know at the end. Okay, that's the first opinion. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, Shalosh regalim, you're right. But for Rosh Chodesh, no, right? Rosh Chodesh atones for someone who was pure, who was tahor, and he ate impure sacrificial meat. And this is based on a verse, right? And why? Because the goat of Rosh Chodesh, the verse says avon, it's a sin, and it's compared to when it says avon. Remember we said gzeira shava, when we have the same word avon, which means sin, and it's said in the goat of Rosh Chodesh, but also in the tzitz. If you remember, the Kohen Gadol wears a golden headband. It's called the tzitz, right? And what do they say about the tzitz? The tzitz brings acceptance for the altar, for the mizbeach, for impure meat. Therefore, because we have the same word, the seir of Rosh Chodesh also atones for impure meat. Right now, if it's impure meat, then what's the issue? It must be that the person was pure, was tahor, and he ate the impure meat. Now, right, if the tzitz broke, right, if this headband broke, so then maybe right, so the Gemara says that the goat of Rosh Chodesh does not atone for the impurity that's going onto the mizbeach, onto the altar, right? And if it's after Rosh Chodesh, the tzitz doesn't atone for eating impure kachim, meaning each one does its own thing. And shalosh regalim, what about the holidays? So that was Rosh Chodesh. What about the holidays? They atone if you didn't know. Again, if you didn't know anything, because it says the word seir, and it's compared to Rosh Chodesh, but this is a different sin than Rosh Chodesh, and it's different than Yom Kippur. Okay, that's opinion number 2. Now, Daf 10, opinion number 3, Rabbi Meir. He says all the goats atone for the same thing. Yom Kippur, the Shalosh Regalim, and Rosh Chodesh, they all atone for the same thing. All the goats are compared to each other because it says Seir, Vis Seir, then it says Seir, Vis Seir. They're all linked together. And therefore, right, because they're all connected, so then they are all, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so then, just looking. Okay, so then that means that they are all connected, and therefore everything works. Okay, so now the Gemara says, but with kachim, we didn't learn this yet, but we're going to learn when we get to Masechet, when we get to Masechet Zvachim, we're going to learn that when understanding the laws that have to do with the temple, you're not allowed to learn A to B to C, right? In regular laws, you are allowed to learn that, but in other laws, you are not allowed to. Meaning, when we get to the world of the sacrifices of the temple, you cannot learn A to B to C. And therefore, what did we just say? Oh, we learned from the goat of Rosh Chodesh to the goat of the holidays to the goat of Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, no. That's not what we did. They all are learned from Rosh Chodesh, or from Yom Kippur, or from Shevuot, and therefore, since they're all learned from the same thing, it is still okay. Or maybe it's okay because it is we put them all together at the end of all of the holidays. It says all the holidays are linked together. So because the verse links them together, we could we can learn one from the other because they are all linked together. Okay, now the next is that the goat of Yom Kippur that's done inside doesn't do what the goat that is done outside, right? As we said, the one inside only suspends the punishment when you didn't know, but right, we said on the one outside does give atonement, which is very different. Rabbi Shimon says that each sacrifice atones for separate things. Right, it says ota, right, meaning that it's separate, and only that sacrifice, right, atones for each thing. Again, if you remember, Rabbi Meir says that they all atone for the same thing. Rabbi Shimon says no, each one has its atonement for each thing. By Yom Kippur it says one, right, one atonement, not many different things. And that one is the one that's inside. But compared to the outer one, right, again, maybe they both only atone for one thing, meaning they're separate sacrifices that atone for separate things. Okay, another opinion is that Rosh Chodesh is only for one thing, but the Shalosh Regalim, the holidays, atone for their thing and for what Rosh Chodesh does, and Yom Kippur atones for its own thing, plus what the holidays do, plus what Rosh Chodesh does, right? So if you think about it, it's like building up, and each one atones for more things that the one below it does. Right? But it doesn't work the other way. It can't go that way. It only works the way we just mentioned. However, the goat that goes out atones for multiple sins. Okay, so now the Gemara talks about redeeming sacrifices. It says that you can redeem a sacrifice if, okay, so depending on how sanctified this sacrifice is. There are two types of sanctity. Okay, I'm not sure if we've ever discussed this. I'm sure we have at some point, but there's two types of sanctity. One in Hebrew is called Kedushat Damim, right? Only the value is sanctified, right? And that's generally done with things, right? I sanctify this to the temple. This is obviously not going on the altar. I mean that the temple, I'll give this to the temple, they'll sell it, and the money they'll buy a sacrifice, right? So that means Kedushat Damim, the object itself does not have inherent sanctity. And the other type of Kedusha is called Kedushat Haguf, right? The actual object becomes sanctified. This is only for an animal that could be brought on the altar, right? So if you have a goat and you say, I'm going to bring this to the temple for a sacrifice, obviously the animal has inherent sanctity. Okay, now, if, as we said, if it has Kedushat Damim, value, right? The money is what's sanctified, the value is sanctified, you can redeem the object and take the money and buy a sacrifice. If it itself is sanctified, so then you have to wait till that animal gets a blemish, then you can redeem, because if it has a blemish, it can't go on the altar, it can't go on the mizbeach, then you redeem it, and then you take the money and you buy a regular sacrifice. Okay, now that's principle number one. Principle number two, we learned in Masechet Shkalim that every Adar, they would collect the half a shekel, the machatzit shekel, and that money would become, right, from Nisan, that money would be the money that they buy that year's communal sacrifices. If at the end of the year, right, you have leftover animals, the question is, what do you do? Because once it becomes Nisan, the new year, you're not allowed to use animals that were brought from last year's money. So what do we do with them? So now the Gemara explains that if you have left over at the end of the year, so then you can redeem those animals even if they are unblemished. Okay, now that is very unique because we said before you have to wait till it gets a blemish. These are perfectly good sacrifices. Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so now we said that they can be redeemed. Okay, so these are leftover animals from last year's money. We said that they can be redeemed unblemished. So now the Gemara asks, wait a minute, don't they have kedushat haguf? Don't they have sanctity in their body, right? If they're really sanctified, you can't redeem them. So how could it be that you're saying that you could redeem them? So the Gemara says, well, let's learn a similar idea from the Ktoret. Again, the Ktoret is another communal sacrifice, and if it's left over at the end of the year, the Gemara says that you can use it to pay the artisans, and then you can rebuy it with the new money, meaning we see that it could be redeemed. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, but the Ktoret doesn't have, the Ktoret does have Kedushat HaGuf. It's inherently sanctified. How could it be that you're redeeming it? So again, here are two things that have sanctity of their, right, inherently in their body, them, physically, I guess you can say. How are they being redeemed? So that maybe, right, the Gemara says, what, the sanctity just goes away, it disappears? So the Gemara says, no, maybe it doesn't have inherent sanctity. It only has the value, kedushat damim. But the Gemara says, but wait a minute, if that's the case, it wouldn't become invalidated if somebody who is impure touched it, but it does. So it shows that it actually does have kedushat haguf. So then how does it work? So the Gemara says, you're right. Actually, there's something very unique here. The Beit Din, the court, makes a stipulation, a t'nai, that if this animal is needed, so then it has kedushat haguf, right? It is physically sanctified. But if you don't need it, i.e. at the end of the year, so then it does not have kedushat haguf anymore, and therefore it could be redeemed. And that is how it could be redeemed. So the Gemara says, okay, wait a minute. Let's see other instances where this could happen, right? If, let's say, you lost an animal on Yom Kippur, or, right, another sacrifice, and then you found it. And what do you do with that animal? You need to leave it alone till it dies. It cannot be redeemed. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, why can't we say what we said before? Let's say that there was a stipulation in the court that it could be redeemed. The Gemara says, no, right? It's not common to lose an animal, interestingly enough. But our case, it is common that at the end of the year, there would be leftover animals and leftover Ktoret. Therefore, the stipulation was made for those two things, but not these things, right, or other things. The Gemara tries again. What about para aduma? Okay, remember, para aduma is the red heifer that is burnt on Har HaZeitim, on the Mount of Olives, and then the ashes are used to purify a person that became impure through contact of a dead body, tumat met. So now the Gemara says that para aduma can be redeemed if you find a nicer one. Okay, now wait a minute. how could it be that you can redeem it? If it has sanctity, how can you redeem it? Where did the sanctity go? Where did the kedusha go? So the Gemara says it shows that it has a t'nai beitin, right? Again, it must be that there was a stipulation. The Gemara says no. And this is a machloket throughout Shas. How do we understand the para aduma? Right? On one hand, it seems to be a sacrifice. It needs to be unblemished. There are certain, right, very specific rules about how it is sacrificed. On the other hand, it's done outside of the temple. So how could it be a regular sacrifice? We know sacrifices are done in the temple, on the Temple Mount, and not outside. So there's always a machloket. Is it seen like a sacrifice or not? So here the Gemara says, well, again, if you're going to call it a sacrifice, then it has kedushat haguf. It has inherent sanctity. But if you say it's not a sacrifice, so then it has sanctity, but just the value, right, as a means to an end. It's not really a sacrifice. And that's why it could be redeemed. So the Gemara says, actually, no, it does have inherent value, but because it is so expensive, right, so the court did make a stipulation for this, for the para aduma, right? Because again, as we know, the para aduma is very expensive. And let's say you want to find a nicer one. How are you going to buy the nicer one, right, for $1 million if, you just bought one for $500,000, right? So you have to sell this one in order to get money to get the next one. Okay, so remember, we did start discussing if the goat from one holiday can be brought on another holiday. And we said maybe it could because they all atone for the same thing. Or the Gemara says, wait a minute, why didn't we say, no, the court made a stipulation that if you lost, like the goat from this holiday, you can bring it on the next holiday. So the Gemara says no, right? First of all, not everybody agrees with this concept of a t'nai beitin, of the stipulation of the court. And therefore, right, not everyone agrees that you can redeem the sacrifice if it is unblemished. Daf 12, or maybe you can redeem the ktoret because, remember we were talking about the ktoret. So it says maybe you can redeem the ktoret because it doesn't have the concept of a blemish. Remember, we talked about an animal. I understand that maybe it has to stay, you have to wait till it gets a blemish and then you can redeem it. That's fine for an animal, right? An animal gets hurt or falls, so that has a blemish. But ktoret, right, the incense, how can incense get a blemish, right? It's dried, right, herbs and spices, right? There's no such thing as a blemish. And therefore, right, but animals are different and paraduma is unique. So the Gemara says, no, you know what? We have a tradition that the ktoret can be redeemed, just like we said, the animals at the end of the year can be redeemed. Okay, another opinion, according to Rabbi Shimon, you can bring these leftover sacrifices of last year as what's called kaitz hamizbeach. It literally means the summer of mizbeach, of the altar, but it means that there was a concept that if there was ever like a dry spell where people weren't bringing sacrifices and the altar was kind of quiet, it was a slow day, it was a slow temple day. So then what would they do? They would take money that they had in the temple and buy animals and sacrifice a communal olah, a burnt offering. And this was because the idea is we don't want slow days at the temple. We want it to always be busy. So that's called kait hamizbeach. So the Gemara says that you can always use, right, the tmidim, these communal sacrifices. You can bring them as an olah if there's like a slow day at work, right, in the temple. However, if it's a sin offering, so then it can't be used for kait hamizbeach, right? It's because, again, kait hamizbeach is an olah. Olah is a burnt offering. It's a different type of sacrifice. But if it's a sin offering, we can use its value to buy another animal that would be brought onto the altar. Okay, next, let's say we have a communal sin offering, a communal chatat, or the goat of Yom Kippur, or an asham, which is another type of sin offering of a person. If they get lost and then you find them, you have to wait till they get a mum, right, a blemish, and then you can redeem them and use the money as this kait hamizbeach, or as like a volunteer, a nidava, right, another, right, just to bring it to the altar whenever you want to. But again, you can't use them themselves because they are sin offerings. And if it's a sin offering, you cannot use it as an olah, right? So the Gemara explains what is kait hamizbeach. It's like dessert, right? So it's the dessert for the altar, like summer fruits, and therefore it is brought on the altar. You cannot bring a bird as a kait hamizbeach. It can only be from animals because there's no such thing as a communal olah, a communal burnt offering that is a bird, and therefore you cannot bring a bird. The goat of Yom Kippur. So now the Gemara tells us can be used for the regalim, for the holidays, or for Rosh Chodesh, and that's like the bottom line of that conversation. And if you did, right, again, you were impure and you went into the mikdash and you did it on purpose, then the goat that goes inside atones for that sin. All other sins, if you did them on purpose or by accident, if you're not sure, so then you bring an asham talui. We're going to learn about this. This is another type of sin offering. Or even if you didn't know at all, so then the goat that is sent out la'azazel, right, that goat is going to atone for all the other sins. Now the Gemara says it also atones for positive transgressions. The Gemara says, wait a minute, how could that be? Right? It can't be that you didn't do tshuva, because if you did tshuva, then you don't need, if you repented, you don't need the se'ir la'azazel, the goat that goes out. So the Gemara says, no. Rabbi says that you get atonement even if you didn't do repentance, right? This is always a discussion on Yom Kippur, right? How do these sacrifices work, right? Does it mean that you have to do your own personal tshuva and then the sacrifice of Yom Kippur atones for you? Or even without tshuva, there's something very powerful about the day of Yom Kippur, and you get atonement no matter what. So the Gemara says no, right? The verse says that, not no, but a different opinion. That the verse says that if you're liable for karet and you did tshuva and then you die, so then you get atonement and you have, right, olam haba. And again, the Seir La'azazel, the goat that's sent out, atones for Kohanim and for Yisrael, meaning both for, right, basically for all Jews. Or maybe no, maybe it's two separate things. The Seir La'azazel, the goat that goes to the desert, only atones for Yisrael. And then the par, the ox of the Kohen Gadol, that is what is going to bring atonement for all of the Kohanim. And again, the Gemara says, as we said before, and it's just a little bit clearer, Yom Kippur only atones if you do tshuva. You have to repent, and then Yom Kippur is going to atone for you. But, right, again, if you did it by accident, you have to bring a chatat. If you did it on purpose, then Yom Kippur works. And then, and as we said, you have to do tshuva for Yom Kippur to atone for you. And then the Gemara ends at the end of 13 that the Seir Le'azazel only atones for Yisrael and not the Kohanim. And again, it says that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, brings his par, his ox, and asks for atonement for his household. Who are his household? So it could literally mean, right, himself, or his wife and his children, but it could also mean it includes all of the Kohanim, right? His personal ox is for all of the Kohanim, and the goat that goes out to Azazel, that is going to atone for all of Yisrael. And with that, we are finished for today's lesson. I'm happy to open it up for any questions if anybody has any questions. Yes.
First of all, that was one of your most excellent presentations. I don't know if you're trying harder or if it was easier or what the deal was. Now, did I understand you right? Because I'm in printing. Rabbi Meyer, when he said all the goats are related, they're all related, does that mean somewhere, some goat is covering everyone except the three major sins: idolatry, murder, illicit sex? Are they all covered?
Great question. First of all, thank you, because I just thought that was the most complicated cheer that I've ever given. So I thought it was the most complicated.
I thought it was one of the easier ones. Oh, never mind. Go
wow.
On.
Okay. That's great. So thank you.
Stop laughing so hard. That's not nice.
I'm sorry.
So that's great. Okay. Yes, meaning the idea is that throughout the year, you are covered, right? That is the idea. The idea is that, right, I think this is something that is important for us to recognize, that every time a sin offering was brought, now I'm going to add in parentheses, every time we pray, right, for it, when we pray for that korban, right, that whenever you bring that sin offering, we have a prayer that is parallel, right? I.e., right, there's the Musaf prayer for Rosh Chodesh. There's the Musaf prayer on the Shalosh Regalim. That is a sin offering. When we say the prayer of Musaf on that day, we are also getting atonement for those sins. That's really the idea. And I think it's important, because I think people don't realize that they think that you only get atonement for Yom Kippur, right? But if you think about it, we have in our daily prayer, right? We ask for atonement, right? We say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, right? We say, Hashem, please forgive us. So I think it's important. I think everyone focuses on Yom Kippur, which is important, but I think what the Gemara is teaching us is that throughout the year there were opportunities to get atonement. Yeah. You don't have to wait till Yom Kippur. That's what I think but
theoretically, what you're saying, by the time you get to Yom Kippur, pretty much they're all taken care of, except maybe something you just did.
That would be the goal. That would be the goal. Now, the Gemara, if you remember, in Masechet Yoma did discuss, and in the Rambam he discusses it, that depending on the severity of the transgression, you need different things, right? So you can't just be like, I'm so sorry I killed my neighbor. Okay, are we done now?
No.
Right? So
No.
it depended on the severity of the sin, you know, so like some sins, you needed to wait till Yom Kippur went through, right? Again, you know, we all feel when you fast and you know, there's certain parts of Yom Kippur that are going to kind of finalize certain atonement. So some of it is a process that needs different steps, right? So those 3 mitzvot, we said Yom Kippur doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work, it's just not enough, right? Some say that there needs to be some sort of suffering. Some say that only when you die, right? That the death is the atonement. So, okay, yeah.
Thank you. That was
My
amazing.
pleasure.
Amazing.
Yes, and they remind us that, as you were saying, it doesn't cover everything. It's a national covering, and it's coming down on everyone. But when you have offended your neighbor, he's covering what you offended between you and God. But you offended your neighbor, and we're told to remember that you're supposed to clean up that business.
Correct.
Right? Before you come to get complete. Yeah, as you were saying. And I would follow about the brilliance to say
wasn't it?
that I mean, I would defend that your brilliance is incredible each and every time, and I know she does that too. But it really is, and each time each of us perceive that in our own way, whether it was easy for us or hard for us or whatever. And sometimes if it went easy, we think you were extra brilliant. But it's really us.
Thank you.
So, I struggled.
Thank you, Lynn.
I
Thank you so
struggled,
much.
and I know it was a brilliant presentation, but I found it difficult.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Okay, excellent. So
I want to just say one little comment. It's like, you know, sort of a little bit of like on a tangent, that wedding day is considered a mini Yom Kippur.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that many of the previous transgressions, and I mean, you're supposed to fast on your except for certain days, but you're supposed to fast on your wedding day as well, and that's why the bride wears white. It has nothing to do with her purity, you know, but because it's Yom Kippur, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it doesn't matter if it's a second wedding or third wedding or whatever. It's Yom Kippur. It's white. Has nothing to do with you know, her previous situation. Clean slate.
Yes.
And happy State of Israel Day here still in the USA. The Western calendar, May 14 of 1948.
Right, May 14th. It's tomorrow.
Excellent. Okay, wishing everyone a good week and a Shabbat Shalom. And
Thank
see you next
you.
week.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too.
Keep the count.